Has it happened? Still a chance. Is it a goal? It is! He's got the big goal! He's got the premiership! There's my little crossover. Step back. Wide open. And it's good! Not much help. Oh, he doesn't need any help. How about that?
This is the World of Sport.
Welcome to another episode of the World of Sport podcast. I'm Jimmy, and with me, as always, is Mitch. And what an episode we've got planned, because what a week of sport it was. From Leclerc doing the double, we have the Ashes, Australia retaining the Ashes. We have finals footy, international weeks in football, the start of the NFL, which I'm very excited about, and the climax of the US Open in the tennis. What a week of sport it's been, Mitch. But we'll start with the F1. And as just mentioned, Leclerc does the double at having won at Spa last week and has won the Italian Grand Prix at Monza this week. And before we get to the actual race, the biggest part of the weekend was the qualifying madness. I mean, Leclerc, thankfully for him, was in pole position before it. But listeners, if you didn't happen to catch it, go look it up on YouTube or something, because in the final qualifying grouping, if you will, other way around. Only one driver got a lap off because the slipstream was that just overpowered, to use a gaming term. It was 3 to 5 tenths quicker per lap, and it's never been that fast. So all the drivers were jostling for a position, playing games, faking going and seeing if someone else will respond and then go tail in behind them, pretending to go quick around the corner or just brake. Or it was madness. And only Carlos Sainz ended up getting a lap off, because through all their games, they all ran out of time, and Sainz ended up winning from the madness, getting into P7 for in qualifying, and thankfully for Leclerc, he held on to pole. Well, didn't really hold on to pole because nothing happened, but yeah, I'd never seen that before, and it was pretty weird, to be completely honest. I think Mercedes and a few of the other cars will be pretty annoyed with what happened, but you know that it just sort of happens. But yeah, I definitely recommend checking it out, because it is pretty funny to see everyone just sort of anticlimactically realize that they all screwed up. But onto the race, and Leclerc pole position, ended in P1. Both Hamilton and Bottas made critical mistakes at the wrong time on the chicanes. Hamilton just completely went off and ended up going onto I don't even know what you call it, but you kind of have to go through a maze off the track, and lost second position to Bottas. And Bottas was, right on Leclerc's bum and was looking to overtake him, and then just went a bit wide on a chicane and lost half a second to Leclerc on the 51st lap, and that was it. Couldn't do anything about it. Our man Ricardo, Mitch, was in the points. He had a great race. Actually, Renault in general had a great race, picking up points and putting them over, I believe it's McLaren in the Constructors' Championship. Yeah, Ricciardo and Hülkenberg finished 4th and 5th respectively. Didn't really look like they were going to be challenging Mercedes or Ferrari, but yeah, a bit of a brain snap from Vettel as well, who basically he spun out and then just without looking just got back onto the track and completely took out another driver, who then spun out and then got straight back onto the track and took it out another driver. It was sort of, they needed some Benny Hill music on that. But Yeah, it was a solid win for Ferrari at the Italian Grand Prix, and I think everyone there was pretty happy that that Ferrari got up. Uh, that's pretty much all we had on the F1. Qualifying was probably the funniest part of, or the best part of the weekend. So if that's the case, then there's probably not saying too much for the race. Um, in other news, we'll move on from the F1 and the Ashes. It didn't necessarily complete itself, but the Aussies have retained the Ashes, which is great for us Aussies, especially after Headingley. I'm not sure my heart can take any more tight finishes like that again. I was about to give up, go to bed with 15 overs to go when Marnus Labuschagne struck. And yeah, there's a lot of fist pumping going on while I probably should have been asleep. But yeah, oh well, who needs sleep anyway? 3 a.m. That's right. That's what coffee's for, isn't it, Mitch?
Exactly. And I think these past couple of weeks, I've been aging in dog years on day 5 of these tests. They're doing a number on me, but yeah, good for Australia to come away with the chocolates and retain the Ashes.
Yeah, I told myself after Headingley I wouldn't do that again, but the greatest TV show, the greatest live TV drama is not Love Island or any crap like that. It's always going to be sport because it is unscripted and you just can't write some of the things that have been happening in the Ashes so far. Whoever said T20 cricket is replacing Test match cricket is a liar because this Ashes series has just been phenomenal. It is just, yeah, I agree that I've aged in dog years as well, and I'm a loss for words. But we'll get to the actual game, and I feel like we start every segment of the Ashes with this. Steve Smith is just not human.
No, not at all. And it's really exciting. Whatever he does, I enjoy watching because I feel like I'm watching history in the making. And I think he's going to be one of those players that I tell my kids and grandkids. I remember when I watched Steve Smith play when I was younger, and he was just miles ahead of anyone else. And he's going to go down in history as one of those players that changed the game forever.
No one has got him out. I feel like he's got himself out in every innings, either by picking up the run rate or batting for a declaration or having already scored 200 runs and, feeling the fatigue.
Well, even in the 200 runs, I think he only got out because he was trying to push for the declaration as well. So I think they have absolutely no answers for him. Steve Smith stays in as long as Steve Smith wants to.
Yeah, exactly. And combine that with Marnus Labuschagne in the same team. It was actually interesting after Headingley, Geoff Archer came out and said that the ball's in England's court, and everyone was, kind of saying the momentum has shifted and England now have the ascendancy, and referring to past Ashes where Australia have let it slip and England have gone on to take the ascendancy. And I thought to myself, there's 2 batsmen that in the Australian team that England have had no answers for, Marnus Labuschagne and Steve Smith, and now they're going to be in the same 11. Like you have to get them out before you get any momentum, and it sort of proved itself in the first Australian innings where both of them continued their dominance and made big scores.
Yeah, and I think especially coming into this final test, it's not a dead rubber. There's still a lot to play for. I mean, England doesn't want to lose a series on their home soil, and Australia wants to win the series outright. They don't want to just retain the Ashes; they want to win the whole series. And if they do win this coming test, they become the first team in 18 years to win an Ashes series in England. And you think about the Australian teams of the late 90s and early 2000s, I mean, they're some of went down in history as one of the greatest sides of all time, up with like the 70s and 80s West Indian teams. So to be talked about in that sort of vein is something that this team will really want to achieve for.
I don't necessarily think they have the same sort of caliber in batting. We definitely rely on the likes of Steve Smith to carry us in our time of need. But I think our bowling attack, including its depth, is far superior than I can, at least in my time. I can't speak for the Windies of the olden days, but to have the likes of Sids and Pattinson and a youngster Nessa, I think that's his last name, coming through the ranks, and to have the likes of Starkey on drinks duty for the first 3 tests, I think it's definitely the best bowling attack in the world, just straight up. And then you include depth. I think that sort of 6, 7, 8 bowlers are the best at least in my memory.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to when I was a young kid watching cricket, and the bowling attack of Lee, McGrath, Warne, and Gillespie when Gillespie was at his prime, and this just reminds me of this bowling attack we have reminds me of that as well. There's just no break for a batsman. I mean, yes, the commentators are talking, okay, they've just got to see off Hazelwood and Cummins. But then you've got to deal with Nathan Lyon on a turning pitch and Mitchell Stark bowling 155 km an hour thunderbolts at your toes. I mean, there's no one that they can even relax to face. And it's the same as in the early 2000s. Yeah, you see off McGrath and Brett Lee, but then you've got Jason Gillespie swinging the ball and Shane Warne bowling you around the legs. There's no escape for these batsmen. And I think, yeah, Australia's strength really at the moment is obviously Steve Smith, but then the bowling attack is just streets ahead of any other bowling attack in the world right now.
I think to add to that, and what my point was before, is that England were found out once Jimmy Anderson and Chris Wokes and stuff sort of went down, because you bring in players that just aren't the same caliber. And sure, you have Jofra Archer or whatever, but even he is not quite there yet. And we saw that in this test, that he still has quite a bit of ways to go before he fulfills the big boots that everyone sort of laid out for him. And Australia, though, the 6 or 7 that I mentioned, one comes in, one comes out, and it's just the same sort of lethal attack. There's no let up even on the sidelines, and I think that's something that no country has ever really seen. You've always had, you 4 sort of premier bowlers, but Australia have 6, 7, 8 players that are just genuinely superstars with the ball in their hand, and that's unprecedented, at least in my mind. And England got found out once Jimmy Anderson went down. I would have liked to have seen the Ashes with Jimmy Anderson and Jofra Archer from the start. And I think if, like in India, if Bumrah goes down, India have no one to replace him. And the same can be said for almost every nation except probably Australia's attack.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And the depth is probably a real strength of ours, and invaluable. And just sort of moving on the batting side of things, huge questions asked of Warner, I reckon, after that. Not even huge questions. I think he's just dropped at this stage.
I think he's dropped as well.
I think
he's had one good innings.
Yeah.
And even that was a struggle.
Yeah, he made a pair in this last test, and I think somewhere it was the first time any Australian player has made a pair since the 80s. And for that to be your opening batsman, you just can't have that in the team. I think he's gone for the next test, and hopefully we welcome back in Cam Bancroft.
I did pose it to you a couple weeks ago when I said, I questioned when Bancroft was dropped, why Warner wasn't dropped instead. Because, Bancroft was at least soaking 40, 50, 60 balls. Sure, he wasn't making the runs, but at least he was spending time in the middle, similar to what happened to Josh Butler towards the end. Form can only be gotten through time in the middle. And, you know, Bancroft is spending half hour, 40, an hour in the middle, whatever it ends up being. But that's still progression towards his form. It's not that I didn't see that from Warner. He just was flat out rubbish. Like, what's the opening bowler's name for England? Stewie Broad. I could picture his face. I couldn't think of his name for a sec. He just had the wood over him. And, you sort of said he's got the runs in the bank. He's got the history, yada, yada, yada. And I said, he's got the history 18 months ago when he was part of the Australian squad. He just doesn't have that now. And, I thought it was a bit unfair to Bancroft that he was spending time in the middle, but he copped the flack for just a bad opening partnership in general.
Yeah, but I mean that's always going to happen. If there's two guys that are both underperforming and one's got 6,000 runs on the board and the other's a relatively unknown quantity, then you're always going to go with the guy with runs. But I mean, saying all that, the Oval is known as a batsman's paradise in England, so maybe they give Warner another chance on a really favourable batsman's dream. And Steve Smith he's played 2 tests at the Oval, and he averages over 140 there. So I can't even begin to think what he might do there next weekend, like triple century or something like that.
Oh, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. He might. I'd laugh if he gets a pair now, but
I mean, he could still get a pair, and his average will be still higher than anyone else's by miles.
probably everyone else combined.
Yeah.
But the Oval, the fact that Australia has all these bowlers in reserve is just it's just not fair to England at this point, because you have Pattinson and Sids who have just sat out for best part of 2 weeks, something close to that, and you have a tired English bowling attack who's gonna have to bowl to Steve Smith, Labuschagne, and if they pick Warner, the entire Australian bowling attack who have batting lineup who have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Like it's just not going to be fair for them.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see.
But in saying all of that, even with the Oval coming up, I'm just stoked that no pun intended, that Australia beat England. And look, I've been riling up my cousin who lives in England and sort of poking the bear, if you will. And it's just been hilarious to see the reaction. I think he's adamant that Australia have cheated. He's just not sure how, which is a direct quote from him. He said maybe Steve Smith's bat is not regulation or something. But despite the jokes, we'll move over to the AFL and finals footy, baby. Well, it was exciting for me till about Friday, because Thursday night was an absolute killer for any Bombers fan. But as a realistic Bombers fan, I'm not too surprised that it happened. Mate, what do you see at your end from a non-biased point of view?
Yeah, from a neutral observer, I think they came out and said, look, we saw what Hawthorn did and wanted to replicate that a bit, but it's not really the type of thing you can change your game plan in 2 weeks. And I think they probably would have been better to play their own game. I think they went over there trying to play someone else's game. If they'd just gone over there and stuck with their own game, might have been a bit of a different story. But I think Essendon's track record in finals of recent
Is
times,
woeful.
hasn't been very
Is
good.
non-existent actually.
Yeah, so that probably didn't help them, and it's always playing in their mind. But I think West Coast is a very, very good team, and they play a really good brand of footy that stands up in September. So I think it's not so much what Essendon did wrong, but West Coast just played really well.
Yeah, I agree. But in saying that, I think Gary Lyon sort of summed it up perfectly when he said the Bombers just played stupid football. We just bombed it into the forward 50 line, to the forward 50 high, just unintentional delivery into the forward 50. And when you have McGovern and Brass back there, they're just going to eat that up all day. Thank you very much. 23 intercept marks or something along those lines. And with the slingshot, if you will, that's sort of the name that everyone has coined, the Bombers going forward. With the slingshot, they have no one covering back the likes of Sard or McKenna or whoever comes off halfback, and the Weagles were just far too clean. McGovern would intercept mark, and then straight away they'd be over the top of whoever was on the attack and chop, chop, chop. Ended up doubling our scoring shots. So, I mean,
Yeah.
there was no surprise, but like the Bombers didn't help themselves with missed tackles and with just dumb forward craft. So, don't take anything away from West Coast, and I think they are the big X factor, maybe along with GWS, but they're the big X factor outside of the top four. So I
Yeah.
think I think as soon as everyone saw West Coast outside the top four, they sort of, it probably wasn't a great, a great thing to have potentially West Coast in the second week if you lose the first one.
Yeah. And you can't count out their midfield. I think their big three, Shuey, Gaff, and Yo, are probably one of the best trio of midfielders in the competition, if not the best. And that Nick Nat factor coming back in, providing a lot of explosive power in the ruck and just creativity and excitement up forward. So I think that they could be a real, as you said, X factor in the weeks to come.
Nick Nat was huge, and I saw a photo of him and T-Bell, and Nick Nat was a full body length higher than him in the ruck, and just you can't compete with that athleticism. Similar to what the Cats faced against Brodie Grundy on Friday night footy, and they got found out.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Brodie Grundy because I don't know what Chris Scott was thinking, whether he made a typo on the team sheet or something, but they went in without a ruckman, and they played Blixarves as their ruckman.
Yeah, well, he came out after and said, if he had his time back again, he'd play Reece Stanley. So I think he acknowledged his mistake. They did it. They did a couple times throughout the season to varying levels of success. I think they sort of went with the logic, well, if we're going to lose the ruck anyway, we may as well get a bit of athleticism around the contest.
Yeah, try and get a fourth midfielder in there.
But yeah, Collingwood were just far too strong. But in saying that, they probably were the worst off from the loss with DeGoey going down. So it's hard to get a read on Collingwood. Yes, they won against a lackluster Cats, but they also came off second best in terms of injuries.
Yeah, and I was going to bring DeGoey up. I mean, what sort of impact do you think that has on their chance to go deep in September?
Well, he's on his way to Germany at the moment to see some specialists. They said any chance to get him up is they'll happily take the risk. Honestly, I don't know. It's hard to say this early on, but I mean, he's sort of Dusty-esque, isn't he? And he adds so much dynamic ability to that forward line that just brought back in Stevenson Jamie Elliott's, jumping buildings at the moment. He's flying, and I think with him, they're up there in terms of premiership favourites. Without him, it remains to be seen how they fill that hole.
Yeah, and I think having another week off really gives them every opportunity to do what they can to get him back in. And I think it'll be more exciting with him in finals.
They could also put, Darcy Moore had an unbelievable game down back, but he's also an option to go forward if they're desperate. So I'm not really sure, but that for final sake, I hope he gets up and about for the very least the grand final if they make it.
Yeah, I guess then moving on to the two Saturday games, Bulldogs versus GWS. I guess it was a bit of an unknown this game going in. People weren't sure whether the Dogs would carry in their form and maybe do a bit of a repeat of 2016, or GWS would finally find their old form. And we saw some real unsociable footy from the Giants, which I haven't really seen much of before from them. But Toby Green, the incident with Bontempelli, it really didn't look good, did it?
Well, it doesn't look $7.5 good, does it?
No.
I'm kind of glad that he got off, not because I condoned what he did or anything, but as I said with De Goey, for finals' sake, you want the best players against the best players. So I'm kind of glad that he's playing next week. There's no proof that he gouged any eyes or anything. There's no conclusive evidence, so you can't do it on hearsay or whatever. So I'm glad that they didn't charge him on punish him for eye gouging without conclusive proof. I mean, I saw the incident a few times, couldn't pinpoint anything. If he did it, then that's just not acceptable. But without proof, you can't really do anything. But in terms of the game, the script kind of flipped, didn't it? We all kind of expected this from the Dogs, not the Giants, and the Giants just kind of had a bit of mongrel about them. Really went after Bontempelli. They said he was untaggable, and they sort of nullified him and
kept into 2 disposals in the second half.
Yeah, it just the script was pretty just nothing that we were expecting. Yeah, as we said, we thought it would be the other way around.
No, they just beat up on the Bulldogs and were too tough for them. And I think that's something teams will look at and look to do next year, is if you can get hard and physical around the Dogs, then you don't let them play that running free style frenzy game that they like to play.
Well, that doesn't bode well for my Bombers either. But in another sour note, in terms of injuries, Ed Norton has done something to his knee. Hopefully, it's not a ACL, but it's another. Losing in finals is one thing, but having an injury like that is just adds insult to injury, doesn't it? And but yeah, we didn't see that result coming. I think I tipped Giants just out of devil's advocate, but yeah, I don't think any of us. We kind of this first week of finals was kind of anticlimactic. I don't know about you, but a lot of blowouts. Even the Collingwood Cats game was pretty comfortable for Collingwood, despite the late surge. Kind of a weird feeling left in the mouth after that, and that sort of reciprocated in the Lions, Tigers game.
Yeah, I think everyone was sort of wanting Brisbane to at least give them a run for their money, and they did in the first half, but the second half they sort of fell away. But I don't think it's all doom and gloom for Brisbane. They did do enough to get that second chance and 2 home finals, which is important. And I think finals losses, you speak to any players on great teams that have won multiple premierships, and they say that the finals losses are invaluable. And I don't know if it's enough to learn from and build on after 1 week. But definitely for the future, for the next 3, 5, 10 years, it's for these young players, it's going to be invaluable experience for them and how they respond to that.
Mm. I did hear some commentary that the Tigers brand of footy really stood up in finals, and it's not just wet weather footy; they're killing teams in the dry as well. And yeah, it really showed against the Lions, especially at the Gabba, against a hostile packed stadium. So yeah, Richmond are probably the favourites.
Definitely the flag favourites at the moment.
Don't really know what to expect from the Lions now. Not sure if they're just too young or what happened. Was it a once off? Mitch Robinson's out of the next game as well. I don't know. As I just said, it was sort of a weird first week of finals footy. A lot of blowouts, a lot of probably more questions than answers. Yeah, I couldn't really get a read on the Lions, but I kind of got the feeling watching it that a lot of their youngsters were just overawed by the situation. And the Tigers are premiers in 2017, been there, done that. I think prelims last year, so that experience just was telling.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll see how the Lions respond against the Giants next weekend. I did think there was one really big positive that I took from this weekend of footy and one really big negative. The positive was that in 2 weeks' time, there's going to be 2 finals at the MCG, a Collingwood home game and a Richmond home game. And I think that is going to be a huge weekend of footy. I would say expect 90,000 plus at each of those games.
Absolutely. I mean, both of them are massive clubs in their own right, let alone, for prelims.
Yep. And I think the biggest negative of the weekend is obviously the terrible news about what happened to Danny Frawley today.
Yeah, well, it is similar to what happened to Hubert last week. It just sort of, you don't even know where to start. It just kind of makes you sick in the stomach. And naturally, we pass our condolences to his family and friends.
Definitely. And I think the way that I've been hearing it reported, and I don't know how much how accurate this is, but Frawley was quite open with his struggles with mental health, and I think this is a great time to sort of just take stock in people in your lives. If they're struggling, reach out to them and encourage them if they need help to reach out for help.
Yeah, in particular in sport, much is made of masculinity or whatever you want to call it. It's out of this, you have to be mentally tough. You can't show weakness. You can't cry. All that bull crap, in my opinion. Just take care of your friends. Sit down with them. Ask them if they're all good. If something's not, if you can see something's not right. Masculinity means nothing if one of your great mates, someone you love, don't even say like you just like them. If they're your good mate, you love them. It means nothing if they're dead. So just take the time out to really make sure that each and every one of your mates, and even those that aren't necessarily your mates, make sure that they're all right mentally, because and that's something not to be messed with.
Exactly. And I think it also the the tragic events that's happened with Frawley, as sad as it is, it sort of provides an opportunity for people to start those conversations. So if anything good can come out of it, that this is something that can be positive taken from it.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're struggling, just reach out. I guess that's probably my only advice. Let people know you're struggling, because whether you think it or not, there's people out there that love you and care about you, and um, they're happy to sit down and hear about it. God knows I've had my struggles, and I'm glad my friends were there to help me through it. But in particular in sport, we got to sort of get rid of this emotionless masculinity kind of aura. Um, but yeah, that's probably my little spiel about mental health. Moving on to US sports, and joining me every week, as always, is a genuine superstar of American sports journalism, Nellie Allentook. It's great to have you on the show. We'll start with the NFL, and well, I totally didn't cry this morning as a Steelers fan, but well, the Pats just sort of, I've lost all hope. Let's put it that way. How I know last week we said that our money's on the Pats, but they came out, and I'm genuinely thinking about starting betting and just putting everything on them to win the Super Bowl.
I mean, it's early. It's at this point, it's really hard to tell if a team is good or if the other team is really bad. Sorry, James. But I mean, even with AB coming to them, I just don't see them being stopped.
Well, I think AB is either going to make them unstoppable or just the laughing stock of the league. I think all Patriots fans, all Patriots haters, sorry. I think everyone's hoping that AB kind of implodes their locker room. I think all NFL realists will just think that's laughable because they'll just get rid of AB before he does any damage.
I mean, Bill Belichick is not going to let him have an attitude problem. I think it was probably part of him signing there. They were like, you have to behave. Obviously, none of us know what the actual details were, but just Bill Belichick's history and the way he runs his team, I think if AB becomes a problem, he's out of there. I mean, Bill Belichick cares too much about winning.
Agreed. For those listeners out there that don't know the scenario, Antonio Brown, who we have talked about on previous episode and who the entire NFL world has been talking about, he sort of did everything in his power to get released from the Raiders and then signed almost immediately with the Patriots. I mean, call me a conspiracy theorist, but I think there was more going on in the background that we know. There's people coming out that, like the Pat McAfee show, he said on it that he thinks that was AB's plan all along because the Steelers were never going to trade to rivals in inverted commas, the Pats. And yeah, there's talk that this was always his plan to get himself released and to go to the Patriots, which is it looks. The evidence is kind of there to support that as well. What do you think about that?
I mean, that's a very.
I mean, it is a stretch. It is a stretch, but in saying that, as I said, like everything kind of looks bad for AB after everything he did on social media.
I mean, I agree. I think, first of all, his social media presence is quite impressive. We haven't seen the videos he's posted. Just look at them for the entertainment value and sort of set aside everything else because they literally look like Nike commercials to me. But, I mean, it was obviously he didn't want to be in Oakland. I mean, he showed up from the start, making up that whole helmet dispute. I don't know if this was necessarily his plan. He obviously didn't object to it, though, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I was watching an NFL live. I'm not even sure what it was, like a week one recap, and someone said that they would love to be a fly on the wall listening into the conversation AB has had along the journey, and I just couldn't agree more with that statement. I
think everybody would.
As a Steelers fan, like AB means nothing to me, but just from, as you said, pure entertainment, I just would just kill to know the actual story behind it all.
Yeah, me too.
Uh, there was more games, obviously. The NFL world doesn't revolve around the Patriots and AB, despite what AB will probably tell you. But a big statement from a division rival of the Steelers, the Ravens, with Lamar Jackson, aka the running back, coming out and just having almost a perfect pass rating as a quarterback.
Yeah, I was just talking about this with somebody. So, as I said earlier, in week 1, it's hard to tell which teams are really good and which teams are really bad. Because a decent team can look really good against a bad team, But with the Ravens, I mean, you could just tell the way he was playing, no matter who Lamar Jackson was. Like, even though they were playing the Dolphins, and the Dolphins are
Awful.
obviously the hit of the NFL. But Lamar Jackson just looked good, and you look good. You can tell that even if they're playing a bad team. He just looked so polished. His throws were clean. Just everything was working right for him. He was a huge statement. I love that he owned up to the running back comment. Really showed his confidence and how he believes in himself.
It was ominous. All the talk about the Browns and the Steelers in the division, and the Ravens are just sort of, hey guys, we're still here and we're better than both of you. So
I mean, speaking of Browns, I mean, I think everybody was shocked at how they played yesterday. People were expecting them to be contenders this year, and they just looked horrible.
Yeah, especially against the Titans, who I didn't have anything positive for them really going into the season. So that's even worse for the Browns. It's not like it was the Rams or the Pats or anything. It's the Titans.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it'll be fascinating to see how the Browns respond. I think Odell Beckham Jr. said we were bound to have some adversity. Why not have it now? Well, mate, just don't have it at all. Like, have it in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment.
Yeah, and the MVP from last season picked off right where he left, and just tore the Jags a new one, to be completely honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that game was a bit of a. I mean, it was an interesting game because everybody got hurt at some point, but like the Chiefs just came out. Like that's at one point you were like, okay, what point do you put your backup in? At what point do you just rest your starters? It looked like the Jaguars were still playing a preseason game.
Yeah, it was. It's actually been quite a fascinating opening week. You also covered the Jets game and Le'Veon Bell start, and they blew a 16-0 lead. I think it was over Josh Allen and the Bills.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that the Bills won yesterday; it was that the Jets lost.
Yeah, typical Jets.
Why they should have lost that game. Their defense, CJ Mosley, one of the defenders got hurt going into the fourth quarter, and he's definitely the leader of the defense. I mean, he's the play caller for them. And the defense just didn't know what to do without him. Their defense has no depth, nobody who can step up and be that voice. And you just saw them fall apart, basically. Their kicker, who I would expect to be released probably around 2 o'clock today, that's my thoughts, is that he missed an extra point and a field goal attempt that would have easily won the game for them, too.
I think he came out and said he expects to get cut.
The coach basically said, somebody asked if she was going to be cut, and coach was basically like, I've talked to our personnel guys, so like, yeah.
We've been talking about Daniel Jones a lot in the last couple of weeks, but Kyler Murray came out and led a massive second half comeback against the Lions.
Yeah, I missed all of that game, so I'm not entirely sure how they did, but there was a lot of hype about him. The Cardinals need somebody, and looks like he can be the guy. I like that they had a bunch of people in the stands wearing headbands modeled after him. I thought that was funny, in the city embracing him. But, I mean, they're going to be interesting, too, because nobody expects them to be good.
I think every performance like that is just confidence boosting for the entire franchise, and it's not like it's not like they really need the number one pick anymore, because they have their hopefully franchise quarterback. So Now they're just trying to build for the playoffs. So, every positive result goes a long way to that. And the Cowboys keep on rolling on as well. Dak Prescott, 4 TDs. Zeke just
Was really
sort
good.
doing Zeke as well.
And
not really
Eli
too-
Daniel Jones saga continued.
Yeah. Well, there's talk that Daniel Jones will be starting before the halfway point of the season.
I would think sooner.
Really?
I mean, I think the fact that they put him in yesterday shows a lot already.
That's true. Yeah, he did. I think he got like 4 passes off or something. So
I think they give Eli Manning a couple more chances and then they bench him.
yeah, I think he probably gets like the first month to make the spot his own.
Yeah. Because after that point, if they get too far in a hole, it's too hard to dig out.
Yeah. But in saying that, you don't really want to rush Daniel Jones into the NFL. It'll be nice to just sort of slowly integrate him over the next sort of half season, full season maybe. And, that way he's not just sort of tossed into the deep end and sort of, like go win us games on your own. Like it doesn't really work like that. It'll be nice to have that mentorship to go in.
You do it. You just get thrown in and see how you react. You don't really agree with that easing somebody in. I mean, look at all the other rookie quarterbacks that start right away and do fine. I think if you're going to be a star in the NFL, it's just how you get thrown in, and if you survive, that's when you know you've made it.
Yeah, fair call. I like it when quarterbacks get sort of tucked into bed and progress from the old quarterback. It just seems like a fairy tale end to me. There wasn't really a whole heap of big talking points from this first week. We've covered most of them. The Rams got off to a good win against the Panthers, a strong Panthers. Christian McCaffrey put his hand up in the contention for best all-purpose running back in the entire league with like 200 all-purpose yards. So he's going to have a blinder. Cam Newton, I think he went for -2 yards on 3 runs. So Cam Newton has definitely changed as a quarterback as well as he's gotten older. But, the Rams keep on rolling. Good win. Good win for them. Integrated Todd Gurley in nicely. Vikings. Sorry?
Eagles had a big comeback against the Redskins.
Yeah, they really did. I wouldn't be surprised if Carson Wentz makes a big push for MVP this year, similar to what Mahomes did last season.
I wouldn't go that far.
I just said I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not necessarily going that far yet. I'm just saying # watch out for Wentz.
All right.
And I suppose another big player in this week was the Vikings. They really just didn't let up on the Falcons. I think the Falcons' first score came in the second half. So, Dalvin Cook, Thielen, they just sort of rammed the ball down the Falcons' throat and just said, "Come get us!" Like it was a clinical performance. But yeah, not really too many talking points. I'm looking forward to the Texans Saints tomorrow. That'll be a good game, and don't really care about the Broncos or the Raiders, but probably shouldn't be saying that on a podcast. But I just don't see it. I think the Raiders are kind of just going to implode after everything that AB did to them. So, but it'll be fun to see how they react. That's pretty much it for the first week of football. Kind of uninspiring, I guess. A lot of blowouts. But moving on to the US Open, and not a fairy tale finish for the US home crowd, with Serena Williams going down to yet another Romanian.
She's Canadian.
Or Andreescu is about as Romanian of a last name as you'll get. And I can say that as someone with both parents who are Romanian. She is Canadian, but she I think she was born in Romania, or both her parents are definitely from Romania.
My bad. But yeah, I mean, she's also so young. I think that's what makes it crazy. She's the first person from Canada to win, and Canada kind of went crazy. They're having such a good sports year. They won NBA too.
Yeah.
I mean, she just looked good and clean, and she kind of out-energied Williams. I think that's the only way to put it.
Yeah, well, it didn't help that Serena had arguably her worst game of the entire tournament in the final. Her serve was just completely off. And
how Bianca and Rafael both had the same celebration after, where they just like lay down on the court and like soaked it in.
Yeah, I can't imagine the physical toll of that tournament would have on your body. Just 2 weeks of, just the most intense tennis that you can get. I'd probably have the same reaction, just sort of no reaction and just lie on the floor and hold myself.
After one match.
Oh yeah. I got up this morning and watched the Nadal win, and it was an unbelievable game. I kind of wish that the women also had best of 5 as well, because, well, more tennis. But yeah, a 5-set epic. Just when Nadal thought he had it, straight sets, Daniil comes back, fights back. He had more winners, I think, in the end than Nadal, and yeah, it was just an absolute epic match. I don't know if you caught it, but the final set was just when you thought Nadal, he just finds an extra gear, and that's probably why he's top 1 or 2 in the world. The guy's an absolute superstar. Actually, I did want to ask. This is his 19th Grand Slam now. He's one behind the great Roger Federer. And I think many people argue that Federer is the greatest of all time. But if Nadal surpasses Federer, does Grand Slams, kind of like Brady and Super Bowls, does Grand Slams equate to greatest of all time?
I don't know. I can't say I'm integrated enough into the tennis world to have like a strong opinion about that. I think it changes the conversation a little bit, but I don't know if it necessarily makes him the greatest.
I think, yeah, it's a fascinating one. I think it really depends on what camp you're kind of in, but I mean, we're so blessed in the men's game to have, arguably the 3 greatest players of all time in the same era. And Nadal is definitely one of them. And, at 2-2, I thought Daniil was starting to just broke back, get into the game, and it was great for him to get back up and then to end up winning. So that was amazing. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is in the US sport. So thanks for coming on this week, and we'll catch you next week.
Great. Well, thank you. Have a great week.
After a great month of Premier League and just in general European football, the international week hit, and it's been pretty boring to us Aussies, but moving over to the UK and joining us as always is the legend himself, Pete Lynch. Pete, how you going? How are you coping with the international weekend or week?
Hey mate, I would say I'm good, but I'm struggling. I think you've nailed it. It is just pretty boring. I mean, we've got all the home nations playing here: England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. But I think the majority, 99%, just want the Premier League back. To be honest with you.
Yeah, that is 100% me. And in probably the only Premier League news. Watford sacked their coach, which, given their start, not awfully surprised at are we?
No, well, I mean, it's just a strange one again. Watford, they're kind of renowned for doing that, infamous almost for kind of sacking their managers pretty rapidly. I think that's Javi Gracia was the only manager to last more than a full season in about 6 years or something like that. But yeah, given their starts, I think the guy just needs a bit more time. I think everyone's thinking that. I thought the fans, the fans liked him. He played some good football, and it was just a bad start to the season for whatever reason. But it's just not meant to be for Gracia. But Quique Sanchez Flores is back in the dugout, so let's see what happens.
Yeah, and the biggest game that happened over the last little bit was Netherlands Germany, and speaking of potentially not much time left as coach, Joachim Löw's probably using up the last of his chips to stay in as coach, isn't he?
Yeah, you've absolutely nailed it again. It's a difficult one because, you wonder how he can struggle with that team, with the players, he's had over the years. But I think, a lot of big players are retired or either, well, actually, he went and told them. I think he flew to Bayern Munich at one stage and told Thomas Muller, Boateng and Mats Hummels they were all finished. So, pretty strange decision. I can maybe see with Hummels and Boateng, but, I still feel Muller can give a lot to that side, with his experience, because it's a really, really young team. But yeah, I think you're right. He might not have much time left, and to go 4-2 down against the Netherlands at home, probably just unacceptable for the Germans at the minute. Especially given their performances in recent years. But yeah, he might be clinging on to a job here at the minute.
Especially with the likes of Mourinho or Arsene Wenger in the wings. I think Mourinho himself said he sort of aspires to coach an international team at a World Cup, or Arsene Wenger said that, one of the two. But
Yeah.
with the likes of with that in just sitting idly by waiting for a call up, he really has to get his backside into gear, because Germany's a superpower of international football. So to lose 4-2 to an up and coming team as well, there don't forget Netherlands is still fairly young as well. So it's not good at all for the Germans.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at that game, you still look at two nations like that, and you still think Germany, yeah, one of the best teams in world football, undoubtedly. So it was a big shock, and I think Jurgen Klinsmann came out and said that he was disappointed with the result as well, which isn't good, because he was actually the guy who chose Joachim Löw to take over him. He was his assistant back in the day, and he encouraged him to take over. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And even Koeman in the opposite dugout, he was really, really surprised. He said after the game why, the Germans were so defensive and had, really weren't on top of the game. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, the post-winning World Cup sort of syndrome is definitely a real thing, and Joachim is just struggling for just to rack anything out of the German team. In saying that, they were level with 20 minutes to go in the game, so it's not all doom and gloom for them. I mean, it's not like they were pumped 4-2 and scored 2 goals in garbage time. They were equal with 20 odd minutes to go. So, like, you can't, as much as we sit here with the end score and say 4-2, 4-2, in game, it probably felt a lot tighter than a 4-2 score.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe he just got his tactics wrong, but I think just the fact that it was home as well in such a big game, they weren't even top of the group at the stage, but they're now top. They've just beaten Northern Ireland to go top on the head-to-head rule. So I think it was a really important game, and especially tonight they bounced back. But yeah, obviously they will be missing those, the big players. But I think Timo Werner, we've talked about him before up front for his club. his pace and his goals are going to be really important. I think they've been missing, someone like that. They've had Muller, as I mentioned, had Mario Gomez a few years ago, but I think Timo Werner could be their finally a real striker since Miroslav Klose.
Yeah, it'll be important to have a firing Timo Werner to all the wider success going forward. Literally going forward for Germany. In the other sort of big games, there weren't really other headline games. Romania, Spain. Romanian goalkeeper had a field day, or just had an unbelievable game to keep them in the game, but couldn't stop Sergio Ramos getting, I think, into the top 5 goal scorers for Spain. And probably the other big game of the round was Serbia-Portugal, and Portugal, have really asserted their dominance in the last few years. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean they keep on shocking everyone, don't you? Like you mentioned Germany, Netherlands up and coming, but I mean Germany, Spain, France, real superpowers in football, and then Portugal are just always there. Nations League earlier in the year, and then you have this now, so they're going to be fighting again, and with Cristiano Ronaldo up top, you can do anything you want, basically, in my opinion.
But in saying that, a lot of the youngsters or the the second string players compared to Ronaldo often step up for Portugal, and in all the finals that they've won recently, Ronaldo's either been injured or done very little. So that's a really good sign for Portugal, that life after Ronaldo's flourishing.
Yeah, definitely. They've always had young guys coming through, and they always seem to, make headlines themselves without Ronaldo. But I think he's just still key for them. You saw him whenever it was, giving a big team talk at halftime or in extra time, things like that. I think you need players like that in and around the changing room. And Ronaldo is always going to inspire you, even if he doesn't do much up front. If you have him in your team, then you can surely think anything's possible.
Yeah, he at least draws players away from where they should be.
Yeah.
And, having the likes of Bernardo Silva, who is sorely underrated in world football, is also a massive plus for Portugal.
Yeah, he's just everywhere at the minute, isn't he? He's just on form for City and for Portugal, and he could just maybe take over that Ronaldo mantle. He's just been a key player for them in recent years and for City, as I mentioned. Yeah, so he could be the one that could step up if they really need someone.
Yeah, and we had the likes of Finland and Italy play and all that good stuff, but I don't know. I get pretty bored during European qualifiers as an Aussie, because none of it really matters to me.
Nah, I think it only matters when it's the actual tournament itself. It's the same feeling here. Don't worry.
So let's quickly just sort of see what's what in the Premier League coming up. For me, the big game on Saturday night is Wolves Chelsea.
Yeah, you're bang on. I mean, I don't think you can call it, can you?
Well, if Wolves' form is anything to go by, it'll either be a draw. Actually, for both of them, it'll probably end up being a draw. They both had quite a few stalemates to start the campaign. And also, just seeing here, United Leicester will also be an absolute cracking game.
Yeah, two similar games there. It's going to be tough to call, especially with the way they've all started the season. I think we mentioned De Gea might be staying at United after all the talk in recent seasons, so that could be huge for them. And he just shows week in, week out why he's still regarded as one of the best in the world.
Yeah, I think they definitely need to put a better defense in front of him to really utilize De Gea.
Yeah, well, they've tried it already this season with Maguire and Wan-Bissaka, obviously. So it's obviously going to take a few games, to come into play. But he's going to be as steady as ever. But Leicester what are they, top 4, top 5 right now? So they're actually in a better position than United right now. So, they could fancy their chances.
Definitely, I'd definitely fancy my chances against United right now. And just quickly before we let you go, the Champions League starts this week. I think every time you have to say champions, you kind of have to. "Oh, champions. Do, 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 do." I've done it. We can move on. We can move on. Napoli, Liverpool, Dortmund, Barca. Probably the two big games for the Wednesday game or the Tuesday game in Europe.
Yeah, definitely. It just feels so good to say it that it's back. Feels like it's hardly been away, but especially with the international break now, we need something back big time, and we're gonna need this. And those two games are just gonna be like you have to sit and watch them. Obviously, Dortmund Barca is gonna be full throttle. See what Messi can do, and then Liverpool Napoli. Obviously, Napoli beat Liverpool not so long ago, so I think it's Liverpool's time for revenge.
Napoli almost cost Liverpool the entire Champions League last season, almost knocking them out. And on the Thursday, a massive game at PSG, Real Madrid, and Atletico Madrid and Juve.
They just keep coming, don't they? I think that PSG Madrid's going to be
directly into my veins, eh?
It's going to be interesting to see where Neymar stands, in that PSG side, if he's going to break back into it, because neither of them have started 100% in their respective leagues, but so that's it's going to be huge for them, because that's the reason why they strengthened, particularly PSG. I mean, you can play your French league games all you want, but if they don't succeed this year in Europe, then they need to have a really hard look at themselves.
I definitely agree. We'll leave you just with the usual prediction for. We'll do the Premier League game. Let's just enjoy the Champions League this week. With the two big games, we said United, Leicester at Old Trafford, and Wolves and Chelsea at I believe their home stadium is Molineux.
It is, yeah. It's just so tough to call. It really is. I don't want to call two draws, but that's what I'm feeling. I really am, which is annoying. If it was the King Power Stadium, if it was Leicester at home, I think, despite United losing at home to Palace, I really think Leicester could have done them a job, at home. But I think United have to show something to their fans and for their manager as well. So I think. It pains me to say it, but I just think a draw in that game. Couple of goals, hopefully. Good for the neutral. And then Chelsea. I'm going to say Chelsea are going to beat Wolves in that game. I just think Tammy Abraham's unstoppable at the minute. So I'm going to go Chelsea 2-0 against Wolves.
2-0, wow. I'm just going to go boring old 2-2 for both games because I see goals in both of them, but no one winning in both of them.
Well, it's quite exciting, 2 each. I wouldn't say no.
Well, thanks for coming on this week, and here's to a better week of football next week.
Absolutely. Pleasure as always, but yeah, let's just wait until next week and we'll have a lot more to discuss, definitely.
Have a great week, and we'll catch you then.
Cheers, mate. All the best.
Well, Mitch, it's been fun, but that pretty much wraps up this episode of the World of Sport podcast. And yeah, I've had a lot of fun, and I can't wait for the next week of sport. The Premier League will be back, thankfully. Hopefully the Aussies can get an outright win in the Ashes. Finals footy continues. There's just so much happening at the moment, and yeah, can't wait for next week already.